Hello, and welcome to episode 41 of Things I've Learned from Barry Harris. Today I thought we would stay on the idea of creating lines using different movements. And since the last episode, episode 40, we dealt with this half step going from the 3 chord to the flat 3 minor to the 2 to the 5. I thought we would deal with another interesting movement that happens in songs, which is not as played as much, but is equally important. And that's the 1 chord to the flat 3 diminished. And in this episode, we'll deal with the key of G. So the G would be G major is the 1 chord. The flat 3 diminished would be B flat diminished. And then to the 2 chord, which is A minor 7. 5 chord, which is D7. The scales that you would think of if we were, say, because remember, we have different lengths of time we can play it for. We can play it for 2 beats a piece, we can play it for 4 beats a piece, we can play it for 2 measures a piece. But in this episode, let's just deal with 1 measure of the 1 chord, 1 measure of the flat 3 diminished, and 1 measure of the 2, and 1 measure of the 5. If we think of it that way, we could think of it as G major up. Now we got this diminished, so we can play possibly one of Barry's, what he calls, well, he doesn't like to refer to it as the diminished scale, but it's the diminished with the tonics of the dominants, the 4 tonics of the dominants. So here's our flat 3 diminished. And let's take it from the same note, the G. So we're going to play a half step below G. Half step below G, half step below B flat, half step below D flat, half step below E. So here would be our scales. Which is really pretty. And then just the A minor to D7, we already know if you've watched previous episodes, it's just going to be D7 straight up and down. And all the things that are included in D7. So I think the idea is, or at least one of the things that Barry likes to focus on is, okay, let's really get into the meat of things. Let's not just play a scale into a scale. Let's start to see all the differences and all the things the same and all the pretty ways we can approach some of those notes. So let's try that. Let's just try to create some lines using those ideas. And maybe instead of going up a scale, let's go down the scale. So let's try that. So let's see if we say 1, 2, 3, 4. That's okay. So that time I came down. I put a half step between the note before I got to the diminished note, and then came down to diminished. Or we could try just using a major arpeggio. We could try maybe some 5-4-3-2 rules. So how would we do it if we said okay, that's a nice one. 1, 2, 3, 4. So every time it gets to this flat 3, I'm thinking these notes, or even, which is that what some people call the diminished scale, and Barry doesn't like to refer to it as half step, whole step. The reason why he doesn't like to refer to it as that, I'll just give you a simple explanation, is if the flat 3 diminished is B flat diminished, we have to find the 4 dominants that are connected to that diminished. So the way we find those 4 dominants is we lower 1 note of the diminished. So if we lower the first note of the diminished, now we have A7. If we lower the second note in this particular scale, drop 2 voicing, now we have E flat 7. If we lower the third note, now we have F sharp 7 or G flat 7. If we lower the 4th note, now we have C7. So here are our 4 dominants that are connected to it. A7, C7, E flat 7, and G flat 7. And if you notice, those 4 notes also make up a diminished. And that diminished happens to be a half step below the flat 3 diminished. So if we put all those notes together, we get what sometimes people refer to as the diminished scale. Now, the importance of knowing some of these things are, I'll just give you an example. So one of the dominants that is connected to this diminished is G flat. So what's a nice thing that sometimes people play is they'll play a G flat major arpeggio going in with some of this. So let's see if I could do that. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So there was an example of a G flat major arpeggio. So let me try another one. Well, let's try it again. There's another example of a G major arpeggio, G flat major arpeggio. So if I took, and again, instead of the 1 chord, sometimes you could use a 3 chord, and all the important things that are on the 3 chord, because the 3 chord, like Barry says, this 3 chord consists of 2 different things. It consists of a B minor triad, and it also consists of a D major triad. So if we think about it, we can run something D major, maybe, into that G flat major. So let's try that. That's a nice one. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. There it was. I even skipped the 3rd. And sometimes you could do that too. Another nice thing to do with diminished is you don't just have to play the diminished scale or just the diminished pattern up. You can also play one pattern on a diminished would be instead of playing first note to second note, third note, fourth note, skip a note, which is really pretty also. Let me see if I can work out one of those. 1, 2, 3. Well, I didn't finish right, but let's try it again. 1, 2, 3. There you go. See that? I don't think I ever played that one before, but it's nice. And those are just jumping flat fifths. Another one you can jump to is instead of playing this note, skipping this note, playing this note, you can play these, which are really pretty also, which is part of the diminished chord itself. So it's a 6th. So let's try one of those. Let's see. 1, 2, 3. Also a nice way to approach it. But the reason why I'm pointing out this flat 3 diminished is because too often we know this sound, which is just 1 to 6, and this diminished is a different diminished. So we've heard these type of phrases before. 1, 2, 3, 4. See, we've heard that a million times. A million times we've heard that. But do we really ever hear? And that is a beautiful diminished, that flat 3 diminished. And what's nice about that flat 3 diminished is you can kind of throw that in whenever you want, also on a regular turnaround. Because remember, most turnarounds are just 1 to 6 minor. So all this stuff like this diminished, that's all things that you're implying over that anyway. So it's totally fine if you want to just use a flat 3 diminished once in a while there. So you could say, okay, the G, that's also one of the diminished notes. So I could say, see, so I used it both times. Da da dee da 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 da, e ba bi dee da. That was the diminished down. So that's a common tone. Another common tone is the 6. The 6. So if I said, let's see. wasn't as nice, but let's see. 2, 3. Which is nice. Maybe I'll try that for the major. That's nice too. So that's just the tonics of the dominants before you're playing the diminished. But do you see how this opens up all these millions of ideas? And this is exactly the kind of thing that Barry does in class, obviously on a much higher level than this, and the lines that he's creating are, you know, astronomically more beautiful. But it's the idea is still the same, which is how many different ways can you look at going from the 1 chord to the flat 3 diminished? And we could spend hours in the class doing that. A couple of hours just working on those two things. And just think about it. If you're home, whatever instrument you play, and you say, you know what I think I'm going to practice today? I think I'm going to practice my 1 chord to my flat 3 diminished. I'm just going to practice that. Maybe I'll practice it for 5 hours today. All the different little cool ways. And I'll do it where I'm doing it 2 beats of the 1 chord to 2 beats of the flat 3 diminished. Or maybe I'll do 4 beats, or maybe I'll do 2 measures into 2 measures. Whichever you decide to do. But this is what I mean. Don't just copy and paste. Here's a change, here's a change. This scale you play for this scale you play for this. You have to learn to play movement. Barry points that out all the time. Coleman Hawkins says he played movement. Barry Harris plays movement. Bud Powell plays movement. This is what playing movement is. In order to have the ability to play movement, the first step is, of course, knowing what scales to play. Yeah, that's true. But then making up beautiful, or hopefully beautiful, creative ideas using those scales and having them sound like music, not like a scale exercise, which is also really hard to do. Really hard to do. I mean, there's a million things you could do on diminishes. All these, there's a nice one too where Barry likes to play, just for example. Oh, let's see, I'm gonna try it. That's his scale that he likes to play. So he'll put chromatics in between all the diminished notes. So you basically get a chromatic scale, but he likes to come a half step above the next diminished note and then surround it, which is really nice. So let's try that. Look, I'm going to play the phrase like it. Works beautifully. That's a really nice one. Didn't quite work out in time, but it's still, I made it right. So 1, 2, 3. That's a nice one. Let's do the one, let's surround this one. So let's say 1. That one works nice too. This really makes me think about things too, like all the things that I have to really practice. You see I'm a little bit sloppy on some of those ideas, but I actually have never played those ideas before. But see, and this is after me studying with him for over, it's since 1993. So you're talking about 26 years. And I'm still discovering things how to do with 1 to flat 3 diminished. That's why I know I've said it in other episodes, but I really feel like his method is the most complete, wonderful method. You just have to let your imagination take over. So if you decide and say to yourself, okay, well this week or today, I'm just going to practice 1 to flat 3 diminished. That's it. I'm not going to do anything else. I'm just going to practice those two things and look at all the little connections between those two things. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode, episode 41, talking about moving from the 1 chord to the flat 3 diminished. And I really appreciate the nice comments, and the suggestions are fantastic. And yeah, I'm really enjoying this. I'm coming up on the 1-year mark pretty soon, and I've had a great time so far, so I'm hoping to keep these going. Anyway, thanks, and enjoy practicing.